How could a quiet Hungarian village become the center of one of the deadliest poisoning conspiracies in history? Between 1914 and 1929, a group of women, later known as the Angel Makers of Nagyrév, poisoned dozens of people, often their own family members. Behind this dark history was a trusted midwife who turned murder into a routine. Today, we're going to uncover the truth about this grim tale and how these women got away with their crimes for years. In the early 20th century, the village of Nagyrév in Hungary witnessed one of the most unsettling criminal conspiracies in European history. A group of local women, trapped in unhappy marriages and poverty, turned to a shocking solution: murder by poison. Led by Zsuzsanna Fazekas, a midwife and the ringleader, they poisoned their victims, husbands, lovers, and even family members. It wasn't until 1929 that the full extent of the crime was uncovered, after the deaths of nearly 50 people. In this video, we'll explore who these women were, why they committed these crimes, and how they got away with it for so long. How did this happen in such a small, close-knit village? For years, the deaths seemed normal. Victims were elderly or sick, and no one suspected poisoning. But Nagyrév wasn't just any village. It was a place where women had very few rights. Divorce was impossible, and many were stuck in abusive relationships. Zsuzsanna Fazekas, the village midwife, saw this desperation and offered a deadly escape: poison. Using arsenic extracted from flypaper, these women could silently rid themselves of their problems. For a time, the deaths appeared to be natural, and the women continued undetected thanks to the lack of scrutiny from local authorities. Nagyrév was a village deeply affected by war, isolation, and poverty. The early 20th century was particularly harsh on this small rural community, where traditional values were strict and women's roles were limited. Many women in Nagyrév found themselves trapped in unhappy marriages. Divorce was virtually unheard of, and men often dominated the household. This social structure created a simmering tension among the women, who longed for an escape. Enter Zsuzsanna Fazekas, a midwife who became notorious in the region. Fazekas was well respected and trusted by the women of the village. During World War I, while many men were away at war, she gained significant influence. But her influence took a dark turn when she began providing arsenic, extracted from flypaper, to help women solve their domestic problems. Many of the victims were abusive husbands, but soon others, sickly relatives, even young children, were poisoned for financial gain or personal reasons. The women mixed the arsenic into food and drinks, and over time, the deaths became almost routine. It wasn't just one or two women involved. This became a secretive network. Fazekas provided not only the poison, but also the moral justification for the killings. She convinced the women that what they were doing was necessary for their survival, and in many cases, they believed it. Some of these women even took pride in their newfound power, viewing the murders as a way to take control of their lives. But the poisonings didn't stay hidden forever. In 1929, after years of deaths that were brushed off as natural, local authorities began to take notice. A rumor spread that the death rate in Nagyrév was unusually high, and an anonymous tip reached the authorities. When exhumations were ordered, the truth came out. Many of the bodies contained high levels of arsenic. This led to the arrest of dozens of women, and eventually, the Angel Maker's ring was exposed. Fazekas, however, took her own life before she could be brought to justice, leaving the rest of the women to face trial alone. The psychology behind the Angel Makers of Nagyrév is complex, and it begins with the environment these women were trapped in. For many, life in a small rural village meant a lack of control over their own destinies. They were often married off young, with few rights, and lived under the constant authority of their husbands. This powerlessness fueled a deep sense of desperation, and when Fazekas introduced them to arsenic, the solution seemed, to them, not only viable but necessary. But what's particularly interesting about this case is the group dynamic. Once the first few murders went unnoticed, others followed. the women encouraged one another, creating a form of moral disengagement where they no longer saw the murders as individual crimes, but as collective survival. It's a case study in how group psychology can normalize extreme behaviors. The bond they shared helped them rationalize their actions, and the more they killed, the easier it became. Experts who have studied the angel makers suggest that poverty, isolation, and oppressive gender roles played key roles in pushing these women to murder. But what's equally important is how they justified these acts to themselves. Fazekas didn't just provide the poison, she provided a sense of righteousness. She framed the murders as a form of self-preservation, and in doing so, she helped the women detach from the reality of their crimes. Psychologically, the angel makers exhibited classic signs of what's known as diffusion of responsibility. Each woman was part of a larger group, so they didn't feel the full weight of the crimes on their shoulders. Instead, they shared the burden, and in doing so, felt less personally responsible. This group mentality allowed the killings to continue for over a decade before the truth finally came to light. The turning point came in 1929, when local authorities finally began to investigate the unusually high death rate in Nagyrév. After receiving a tip, they ordered the exhumation of several bodies. When traces of arsenic were found, the village's dark secret was exposed. Dozens of women were arrested, and many confessed under interrogation. Some even showed little remorse, seeing their crimes as necessary. The trials that followed were sensational, with the public horrified by the scale of the murders. The angel makers were no longer just desperate women, they were seen as cold-blooded killers. Testimonies from neighbours and relatives painted a picture of a village where murder had become routine, and the arsenic-filled food had claimed victim after victim. Zsuzsanna Fazekas, the leader of the group, avoided trial by taking her own life, leaving the rest of the women to face the consequences alone. The story of the angel makers of Nagyrév is a chilling reminder of what can happen when desperation, isolation, and oppressive social systems collide. These women were not typical criminals. They were mothers, wives, and neighbors. Yet they committed dozens of murders, justifying their actions as necessary for survival. The angel makers case forces us to ask difficult questions about crime, morality, and the lengths people will go to when they feel trapped. Though their crimes were monstrous, their story reveals much about the human capacity for moral disengagement. What do you think about the angel makers of Nagyrév? Could something like this happen again in today's world? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if you found this story as intriguing as we did, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss any future episodes. Stay tuned for more chilling true crime stories, and thank you for watching.